The marble floors of the Reynolds mansion gleamed under the morning sun, but inside its vast halls there was only silence. Caleb Reynolds, just 9 years old, stood barefoot near the grand window, his small hand trembling as he pointed outward. His lips moved with the same quiet plea he had whispered for weeks. "Mommy." "Again, there!" Ethan Reynolds, his billionaire father, strode past in an immaculate suit, phone pressed to his ear. Deals worth millions consumed his attention. His son's words? They barely registered. He dismissed them with a wave as though Caleb's voice was nothing more than the rustle of curtains in the wind. But Caleb didn't move. His wide eyes filled with an ache too old for a child. The staff exchanged uneasy glances, yet none dared question their employer. And so, day after day, his small finger pointed toward the garden, his silent cry buried beneath the mansion's polished perfection. The truth sat there, waiting, just beyond that glass. A truth powerful enough to shatter their carefully built world, and when the new maid arrived, Angela Carter, she would be the only one to notice. But this was only the beginning. The Reynolds mansion was a fortress of glass and stone, designed to impress investors and intimidate rivals. But for Caleb Reynolds, it was a cage. Each morning, the boy followed the same routine, barefoot on the cold marble, standing by the tall window overlooking the garden. He pressed his small palm against the glass and whispered the exact phrase, "Mommy." Again, there. His voice carried a rhythm, soft and repetitive, like a broken lullaby. The staff had grown used to it. They averted their eyes, dusted shelves, and polished silver trays. Some pitied him. Others dismissed it as meaningless. None dared interfere, because Ethan Reynolds did not like interruptions. Ethan was a man of power. His name echoed across boardrooms in New York and Silicon Valley. A billionaire CEO celebrated for ruthless decisions that made headlines. But behind closed doors, he was cold, efficient, and distant. He moved through his home the same way he moved through negotiations, with no time for weakness, no patience for vulnerability, and his son. His son was a puzzle he didn't want to solve. Caleb's condition, Ethan often told himself, is something the therapists can handle. My job is to secure his future, not indulge in his habits. But even as he told himself this, Ethan couldn't shake the faint irritation every time he heard those words. "Mommy again." There. Words that pricked at something buried deep in his chest. The day Angela Carter arrived, the mansion felt different. She was not like the other staff, quiet shadows who moved through the house as if they didn't exist. Angela carried herself with calm dignity, her posture upright, her voice warm, her eyes observant. A black woman in her early 40s, Angela had raised 3 children of her own before seeking steady work to support her youngest's college tuition. She'd faced rejection after rejection in the job market, sometimes hidden behind polite words, sometimes bluntly racist. When the agency called her for the Reynolds position, she accepted with tempered hope. The first time she met Ethan, his eyes barely lingered on her. A quick handshake, a nod, and he was gone. To him, she was just another hire. But when Angela met Caleb, something shifted. The boy stood near the window, pointing, whispering. His small body rocked slightly, as though caught in an invisible rhythm. Angela knelt beside him, lowering herself to his height. "What are you looking at, baby?" she asked gently. Caleb's eyes flicked toward her, then back to the garden. His lips moved again. "Mommy?" Again, there. Angela felt a chill ripple across her arms. She didn't understand yet, but she felt the weight in his voice, the longing, the repetition, the truth adults had ignored. It didn't take long for Angela to notice the dynamics in the mansion. The other staff, though polite, kept a distance. A few whispered comments trailed behind her when they thought she wasn't listening. "She won't last long. You know how Mr. Reynolds is? Well, let's see how long she can deal with that boy's habits." The tone she always carried was not just about being new, but about being different. At dinner one evening, Angela served Ethan a glass of wine. He barely looked up, but one of the senior staff, Mrs. Hayes, corrected her sharply. "We place the stem at the right side, not the left. Pay attention. Angela caught the smirk from another maid. It was subtle but unmistakable. She was being tested, not just for skill, but for belonging. She swallowed the sting and said calmly, "Of course, ma'am." But inside, her thoughts burned. "I've been serving people meals since I was 12 years old. Don't tell me I don't know how to set a glass." That night, as she folded linens, she thought of her grandmother's words. "They'll try to break you in small ways. Hold steady, keep your dignity. Truth shows itself in time." Meanwhile, Ethan's life remained a whirlwind of meetings, late-night calls, and chauffeur-driven commutes to Manhattan. "Sir, the board is concerned about the merger," his assistant said one morning as they drove. "They can be concerned," Ethan replied coldly, "but they'll follow my lead. They always do." But beneath the sharp exterior, Ethan was haunted. His wife, Caleb's mother, had passed away years ago in an accident that Ethan never spoke about. The mansion was filled with her photographs, but he had buried his grief under work. Every time Caleb pointed to the garden, Ethan felt a knot in his stomach. He hated it. Hated the reminder of something unresolved, something he couldn't control. One evening, Angela was dusting near the grand window when Caleb's voice rang out louder than usual. "Mommy!" "Again there!" His finger pressed hard against the glass. Angela followed his gaze. For the first time, she noticed something, a flicker of movement in the shadows of the garden. Her breath caught. But when she looked again, the garden was empty. She turned back to Caleb. His eyes brimmed with tears, his small body shaking. Angela whispered, "What do you see, baby?" Caleb didn't answer. He only pressed his forehead to the glass, repeating the phrase like a prayer. From the staircase above, Ethan's voice thundered, "Caleb! Enough!" Angela's chest tightened. She wanted to protest, to explain, but Ethan's glare silenced her, and just like that, the moment slipped away. But the image of that shadow in the garden would not leave her mind. That night, long after the house was silent, Angela lay awake in her small staff quarters. "This boy is trying to tell us something," she thought. "Everyone else ignores him, but I won't. Not this time. Not in this house." She remembered her own son, Marcus, who had once struggled in school. Teachers had dismissed him as lazy until Angela fought to prove his learning style was different. Now, Marcus was thriving in college. Caleb deserves the same fight, she decided. Days passed. Ethan buried himself in work, barely noticing the growing bond between his son and the maid. Caleb had begun to respond to Angela in small ways, lifting his eyes when she spoke, repeating her words, even allowing her to guide his hand when drawing. Ethan saw it once and scoffed. "You're wasting your time. He won't change." Angela turned to him, her voice steady. "He doesn't need to change, sir. He needs to be heard." For a moment, Ethan froze. No one ever spoke to him that way. He wanted to fire her on the spot. But something in her eyes, firm, unshaken, held him back. He walked away instead, muttering, "You don't understand." Angela watched him go, her fists tightening at her sides. "No, you don't understand," she thought. "But you will." One stormy night, lightning flashed across the mansion grounds. Caleb woke from sleep, restless, agitated. He ran to the window, pressed his hands to the glass, and cried louder than Angela had ever heard. "Mommy! There, Mommy!" Angela rushed to his side, heart pounding. Through the rain-slicked window, she saw it again, something moving in the garden. This time, she was sure. She grabbed her sweater and whispered, "Stay here, Caleb." And as thunder rolled, she stepped out into the storm, her breath sharp in the cold air, determined to uncover what everyone else had ignored. The storm had passed, but the memory of that night lingered with Angela like a ghost. She couldn't shake what she had seen in the garden, the faint outline of a figure, the sound of branches snapping under heavy steps. It wasn't her imagination, and Caleb knew it too. Each morning after, he became more insistent. His finger pressed against the glass until his knuckles turned white, his voice sharper. "Mommy!" "Again there!" Angela began to notice patterns. The boy pointed toward the same section of the garden, near a line of tall hedges that bordered the property, and each time his eyes filled with urgency as if begging her to understand. Angela waited until the household had gone to sleep. She slipped quietly into the garden, flashlight in hand, heart racing. The air smelled of wet earth and roses after rain. As she approached the hedge, the beam of light caught something unusual, scratches on the trunk of an old oak tree. Fresh, deep. Angela crouched, her breath clouding in the night air. That's when she found it, half buried in the mud. A small broken locket, its chain rusted, but inside a faded photograph of a woman. Her chest tightened. She didn't recognize the woman, but Caleb's cries echoed in her head. "Mommy!" Again there! She clutched the locket, her pulse quickening. Someone had been here, someone connected to Caleb's memories. Behind her, a branch snapped. Angela spun around, flashlight shaking, only to see Derek. "One of the groundskeepers! What are you doing out here?" he demanded, his tone sharp. His eyes flicked to the locket in her hand. Angela steadied her voice. "I could ask you the same." His jaw tightened. "Stay out of the garden at night. It's not safe." And with that, he turned, disappearing into the shadows. Angela's skin prickled. His warning wasn't a concern. It was a threat. The next morning, Angela placed the locket gently on Ethan's desk. "Where did you find this?" he asked, frowning. "In the garden?" "Near the hedges." Ethan closed the locket with a snap. "This belonged to my late wife. She wore it the night of the accident. It must have been lost in the storm." Angela leaned forward. "Sir, with respect." "That locket wasn't just lying there." Caleb points to that spot every day. "He's trying to tell us something." Ethan's expression hardened. "My son is autistic. He repeats phrases. That's all it is. You will not indulge his fantasies." Angela's hands curled into fists, but she kept her tone calm. "It's not fantasy when he's crying out with his whole heart." For a moment, Ethan's mask slipped. His eyes flickered with pain. Then the walls came back up. "You are here to clean, not to psychoanalyze my son. Stay in your place." The word stung more than he realized. Stay in your place. A reminder of her position, not just as staff, but as a black woman in a house where power wore a white face and a sharp suit. Angela left the office silently, but fire burned in her chest. That night, Angela heard Caleb crying again. Louder, desperate. "Mommy! Mommy!" She rushed to his room. The boy stood at the window, trembling, his finger stabbing at the glass. Angela followed his gaze and froze. A silhouette stood at the hedges, motionless, watching. By the time she dashed to the garden, the figure was gone. Only the rustle of leaves remained. Angela's heart hammered. Someone was hiding here, someone who didn't want to be found. Word spread quickly among the staff. Angela heard their murmurs in the kitchen. "She's stirring trouble. Always snooping around. Mr. Reynolds won't tolerate it." When she entered, the room fell silent. Mrs. Hayes looked her up and down, lips curled. "Some of us know our roles here. Best you remember yours." Angela set down the tray she was carrying, her voice steady. "My role is to care for this child. And if that means asking questions, I'll keep asking." A sharp laugh broke the tension. "Careful," Derek muttered. "You don't want to get yourself fired." Angela met his gaze. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Something about him felt wrong. Too defensive, too watchful. She confided in Caleb during quiet moments. "You're trying to tell us, aren't you?" she whispered, brushing his hair back. Caleb rocked gently, eyes fixed on hers. "Mommy." Again there. Angela squeezed his hand. "I believe you." For the first time, Caleb's lips twitched. Something close to relief, maybe even trust. Angela swallowed a lump in her throat. She wouldn't fail him, not like everyone else had. Late one evening, Angela overheard a phone call as she passed Ethan's study. No, the boy doesn't remember. He can't, and even if he does, no one will believe him. Her breath caught. Ethan's voice was low, urgent, almost panicked. Who was he talking to? What didn't he want Caleb to remember? Before she could linger, the door creaked open. Ethan stepped out, phone still in hand. His eyes narrowed at her. "Do you make a habit of eavesdropping?" Angela shook her head quickly. "No, sir. Just passing by." His gaze lingered on her, suspicious, before he walked away. Angela's hands trembled. The locket. The garden. the figure in the shadows, Ethan's secretive words. The pieces were forming a dangerous puzzle. Angela sat in her quarters, staring at the locket. She thought of her grandmother's wisdom. Truth shows itself in time. But time was running out. Caleb was growing more distressed by the day. The staff's hostility was sharpening, and Ethan's denial was becoming something darker. Fear, perhaps even guilt. She whispered into the silence, "If no one else will listen, then I'll find the truth myself." Angela reached for her coat. She would search the garden again, no matter the risk. As she stepped outside, Caleb's cry pierced the night from his window. "Mommy! Mommy there!" Angela turned toward the hedges. This time she wasn't alone. A pair of eyes gleamed in the darkness, watching, waiting. And then the figure moved, slowly, deliberately, disappearing deeper into the garden. Angela's breath hitched. She followed. The truth was close. But so was danger. The night was still, the mansion asleep. But in the garden, shadows stirred. Angela's feet sank into the damp soil as she followed the figure into the hedges. Her heart thundered, each step heavier than the last. "Who's there?" she whispered, flashlight trembling in her hand. The beam caught movement, a man's silhouette, tall and lean. He froze, then bolted deeper into the garden. Angela's instincts screamed danger. But she chased anyway, branches slapping her face, adrenaline pushing her forward. "Stop!" she cried. "Who are you?" The man tripped, crashing against the oak tree, the same tree where she'd found the locket. Angela's light landed on his face. Derek, the groundskeeper. His clothes were dirty, his eyes wide with rage and fear. "What are you doing out here?" Angela demanded, breathless. Derek snarled. "You should have stayed out of it." She took a step closer. "What do you mean? What's Caleb trying to tell us?" Derek's fists clenched. "That kid doesn't know what he saw." "He doesn't know anything." Her chest tightened. "Saw?" Angela's voice steadied. "He saw something. The night his mother died. Didn't he?" Before Derek could answer, a new voice cut through the night. "Angela!" Ethan Reynolds stormed into the garden, fury etched into his face. "What the hell are you doing out here?" "And with him?" Angela pointed to Derek. "Ask him!" "He's hiding something. Caleb's been trying to tell us all along." Ethan's gaze snapped to Derek, confusion flickering. "Is this true?" Derek laughed bitterly. "You don't want the truth, boss." "The truth would ruin you." Angela's stomach dropped. Ethan's jaw clenched. "Speak clearly," Derek sneered. "Your wife didn't just fall. She was running. Running because she found out the truth about you." Angela's flashlight shook in her hands. Ethan's face drained of color. "Lies!" he hissed. "You don't know what you're talking about." But Angela watched him closely. His mask was cracking. At that very moment, Caleb's scream pierced the night. "Mommy! There, Mommy!" From his bedroom window, his slight figure pointed wildly at the oak tree. His cries echoed across the garden, desperate, unstoppable. Angela turned back to Derek. "What happened under this tree?" Derek's eyes darted, sweat dripping down his temple. "She came to me that night. Said she was leaving you. Said she was taking the boy. You couldn't handle it, could you?" Ethan's breathing grew ragged. "Shut your mouth." But Derek only leaned closer, eyes gleaming. "You let her run into the road." "You didn't stop her. You let her die, Ethan." Angela's gasp broke the silence. The locket. The garden. Caleb's cries. It all made sense. Caleb hadn't been repeating nonsense. He had witnessed the moment his mother fled into the storm. His words were memory, not madness. Angela's voice rose, firm and cutting. "Your son has been telling the truth from the beginning. And you've been too blind, too proud to listen." Ethan's hands shook, his control slipping. "You don't understand. She was going to ruin everything, my reputation, my company, my life." Angela stepped forward, eyes blazing. "And what about your son's life? He watched his mother run for her life and you buried it. You silenced him." The garden was charged, electric. Then the headlights swept across the driveway. A black sedan pulled up, board members arriving unexpectedly for an emergency meeting Ethan had called earlier in the day. They stepped out, their conversations fading as they saw the scene. The billionaire CEO, the groundskeeper trembling, the maid standing firm. Caleb's cries still rang from the window above. Angela seized the moment. Listen to him, she shouted, pointing at Caleb. He's been crying out for weeks. He saw what happened to his mother. He saw the truth. The board members stared, stunned. Derek's face twisted with panic. Ethan's empire, his carefully constructed image, was unraveling before their eyes. Derek lunged, grabbing Angela's wrist. "You don't know what you're doing!" Angela struggled, the flashlight clattering to the ground. "Let me go!" Ethan froze, torn between control and chaos. For once, he wasn't the man with all the power, the board members shouted, rushing forward. Derek released her, bolting into the hedges, but not before he turned back and spat. "If I go down, you go down too, Reynolds." And then he was gone, swallowed by the night. The silence that followed was unbearable. Angela picked up the locket from the dirt and held it out. This is the truth he tried to bury. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, Mr. Thompson, stepped forward. "Ethan, is this true?" Ethan's lips trembled. For the first time, the man who commanded millions could not form a sentence. His eyes flicked to Caleb's window, his son's tear-streaked face glowing in the moonlight. Whispers spread among the board members. Words like cover-up, scandal, and liability. Angela's voice broke the air once more. Calm but cutting. Your son's cries will no longer be silenced. Not by fear. Not by power. Not by you. Ethan staggered back, breathless, defeated. His empire was crumbling, not because of hostile takeovers or financial ruin, but because of a truth his own child had carried all along. The garden erupted with chaos, board members arguing, staff rushing out in confusion, Caleb pounding on the window in distress. Ethan's voice cracked. "Caleb, please, stop!" But Caleb's cries only grew louder. His small voice, once ignored, now cut through the night like thunder. And Angela, standing firm under the oak tree, knew there was no turning back. The truth was out. But the consequences were only beginning. The garden, once immaculate, had become a stage of reckoning. Flashlights from the staff cut across the hedges. Board members whispered in sharp tones. The storm that had brewed for years inside the Reynolds mansion had finally broken in public view. Ethan Reynolds stood pale, sweat dripping from his temples. His hands trembled, not from fear of Derek, but from fear of exposure. For decades, he had controlled every narrative, every headline, every rumor. Tonight, control slipped through his fingers like sand. Angela moved closer to Caleb's window, lifting her voice above the chaos. "It's all right, baby. You don't have to be afraid anymore. We hear you now." For the first time in weeks, Caleb's rocking slowed. His small hand dropped from the glass, his wide eyes softening. His words came out fragile but different. "Mommy gone." Angela's throat tightened. She nodded slowly, her own tears glistening. "Yes, sweetheart. But she loved you, and she never wanted you to be silenced." The crowd quieted. Even the board members, hardened men of business, felt the gravity of the child's words. "Enough!" Ethan roared suddenly, his voice cracking. "This is my family, my son. None of you understands." But the more he shouted, the smaller he seemed. His tailored suit couldn't hide the unraveling. His empire was not being dismantled by rivals, but by the raw, undeniable truth of a child's memory. Mr. Thompson stepped forward, his voice cold. "Ethan, you've misled this board, your investors, and your household. If there's even a shred of truth to what we've heard tonight, your position is no longer tenable." The words struck like a gavel. Ethan staggered, his lips parting as if to argue, but nothing came out. For once, the master of words was speechless. Angela turned to him, her voice low but steady. "Your son didn't need your empire. He needed your love, and you gave him silence." Ethan's eyes flicked toward Caleb again. The boy was no longer pointing or crying. He stared, empty, wounded, unreachable. The weight of that gaze crushed Ethan more than the board's verdict ever could. In the days that followed, Derek vanished into the city's shadows. The police were alerted, but no trace was found. Ethan's name flooded the news. Billionaire CEO under fire for family scandal. His company's stock plummeted. The board forced him to step down. But inside the mansion, a different story unfolded. Angela became Caleb's anchor. She sat with him in the mornings, sketching the garden on scrap paper. She held his hand during thunderstorms, whispering that he was safe. She listened. not just to his words, but to the silences between them. One afternoon, as they sat near the window, Caleb looked up at her. His voice was quiet, deliberate. "Miss Angela, stay." Her heart swelled. She smiled, squeezing his hand gently. "As long as you need me, sweetheart." It wasn't just a promise. It was a vow. Ethan, stripped of power, walked the halls of his own house like a ghost. No phone calls, no board meetings. Just silence, an echo of the silence he had once forced upon his son. He passed by Caleb's room one evening, watching from the doorway as Angela read aloud to him, her voice soft, steady. Caleb leaned against her shoulder, calm at last. For a fleeting moment, regret stabbed Ethan's chest. This is what I should have given him. This is what I destroyed. But it was too late. The mansion no longer belonged to him, not in spirit. Its beating heart was now in the bond between a boy and the woman who had listened when no one else would. On the final night before Angela tucked Caleb into bed, he whispered something new. Something that made her eyes sting with tears. "Mommy, happy now." Angela brushed his hair gently, whispering back, "Yes, baby. She's happy now because you're safe, because you're heard." Outside, the garden stood silent. The oak tree, once a witness to tragedy, now bore silent testimony to truth reclaimed. And in that silence, for the first time in years, Caleb slept peacefully. In the end, the Reynolds mansion was left standing. Still, the empire behind it had crumbled, not from financial ruin alone, but from something more profound: the cost of silence. Ethan Reynolds had built walls of glass and steel, but he had never built a bridge to his own son. And when truth clawed its way through, no fortune, no influence, no reputation could shield him. Caleb's small hand at the window was more potent than a boardroom of executives. His silence carried a weight that shattered lies. And it took someone society often overlooked, a maid, a woman dismissed because of her race and her station, to recognize that truth and give it a voice. Angela Carter proved what power really looks like. It isn't measured in wealth, status, or control. It's measured in compassion, the courage to listen when others turn away, the strength to protect the vulnerable even when it costs you everything. This story reminds us that children see what we refuse to see. They feel what we try to hide, and their voices, whether spoken or silent, deserve to be heard. Because sometimes the slightest whisper can expose the darkest secrets. So if you take anything from Caleb's story, let it be this: never ignore the quiet cries. Never overlook the voices society tries to silence. Whether it's a child, a neighbor, or a stranger, listening can change everything. Because justice doesn't always roar like thunder sometimes. It begins with a trembling hand pointing out a window, and someone brave enough to ask, why? At Hidden Struggles, we go deeper, where emotion meets evidence and drama reveals the system. If this story made you pause, reflect, or feel something, don't forget to subscribe. There's more to come.